I can't hear a thing. You're muted. Simcha's muted. Rivka, how are you?
Good.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so let's say our blessing. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'nasan Anu Es Toraso Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. All right. So here we are ready to continue learning God's Torah. We're doing this on a weekly basis because no one has told me something else they would like to learn instead. I'm always open. So if there's something else you want to learn, you could private message me or you put it on the group and see if we can make that happen if other people also be interested. But for now, we're going to continue with the Torah portion of the week. So this week is portion of Vayeitzei. So we're continuing the life and times of our forefathers. I'm going to overview the Torah portion, which is going to take a little longer than it did last week because it's a lot of different things happening. So to get through, it's going to take a bit of time. I'll try to give some explanation along the way, and then we'll discuss two ideas in there a little more in depth. So Vayeitzei means he went out because this whole thing is about Jacob, him going out, unlike his father and grandfather, Abraham and Yitzchak, Abraham and Isaac, who more dealt in the realm of godliness. I mean, obviously Abraham was very challenged. I mean, he had, 10 very difficult challenges, put himself in a fiery furnace, was willing to sacrifice Isaac, Sarah being taken twice and the famine as soon as he went through a lot of stuff, but he didn't have on a daily basis dealing with evil like Jacob. And Isaac for sure not. Isaac lived in Israel. He had almost none of this stress. So Jacob really represents the Jew. He really represents us. He really represents going out into the world because that's what our history has been like. And that was what Jacob dealt with. I mean, he was 22 years in the house of Lavan. That's this week's Torah portion. That was a very difficult 22 years with this arch villain, his father-in-law. I mean, come on. Intense evil that he had to contend with on a daily basis. And then when he finishes that, next week's Torah portion has to deal with Esav again. So he really is in the world, dealing with the challenges of the world. And therefore, of all of our forefathers, most really represents our journey. So he leaves. Now, it's actually interesting because when he goes, if you calculate the years, doesn't say this in the Torah, but explains in the Midrash, if you calculate the years, that his father told him go to Lavan. If you remember, I told you last week, his mother, Rebecca, knew with the prophetic spirit that Esau was planning on killing him. So she wanted to get him out of there. And she told her husband, Yitzchak, Isaac, I cannot have Jacob marry these local girls. No, it's so horrible. They're so idolatrous. They're so wicked. We got to look at Esau's wives. It's got to go back to my brother and marry in the family. And Isaac said, absolutely. And gives him his blessing and he sends him off. But he doesn't take a direct journey. He actually takes a detour for 14 years. And for 14 years, he is learning Torah. He's learning God's will in a place where Torah was studied in those days. We can imagine there was such an existence, and he went and immersed himself there for 14 years. Says he didn't sleep day or night for those 14 years. Why was he doing that? Because he knew he was going to go to the worst place in the world at that time, called Barren, to deal with the most evil person in the world, called Lavan. And to have the strength to do that, you need to be saturated with a lot of Torah, which is, of course, true for us today. We deal with a lot of evil. We deal with a lot of hard stuff. And also for us, the more we have Torah in our world, the more we learn Torah, live Torah, the more we we have that situation, the more we have the strength, as Yaakov knew he needed that strength to combat what he was going to contend with. So the more we learn and become more and more full and overflowing and saturated with God's will and wisdom, with Torah, the more we have the strength to contend what we have to deal with in this world. So he goes. So now it's 14 years later. His 14 years of not sleeping day or night because he was learning, he was busy. Now he's done. He knew he drank his full for the moment. Now he's going to go on to do what his father asked him 14 years before and get married. At this point, he's a mere 77. And he's going to Haran. He almost gets to Haran. He's like, oh my gosh, I passed such a holy place, the holy place of my father and my grandfather, the place where they prayed and turned to God and built altars to God, and I didn't pray there? No way. He meant, of course, Mount Moriah, where Jerusalem is, where the temple would be built. He's like, I got to go back. That's the holiest place in this world, which it is. So he turns around. He doesn't go all the way back because once already he extended himself to like reach out to God, then God responded. And it says the land jumped to him, which is a very powerful lesson for us in our life. You know, that when we make the effort, here he was very far. Haran was way north past Israel. Haran's not in Israel anymore. He was past Israel in Haran. And he was almost there. And he's like, wait, he already left Israel. Wait, but I didn't pray by this spot, this holy, holy spot that I passed. I didn't remember to pray. Got to go back. Now, when he was walking by Mount Moriah, Har Moriah, the place of the offering of his father, of his grandfather, making that altar there to God, the holiest place in the world, he forgot. Whatever. Didn't cross his radar. God didn't do anything. You don't reach out to me, I don't reach out to you. But when he went so far, and then he remembered, God's like, oh, you're remembering me? You're reaching out to me? You're turning back to begin the long trek all the way back. It was a very long trek from northern Israel all the way back to, if you know the geography of Israel, we're trying to get back to what we would call, say, Jerusalem. That's a very long walk. But as soon as he started that walk, he walked a bit, God said, I'm moving in the mountain to you. Which again is also a very powerful lesson, how if we do nothing, God doesn't respond because we're not doing anything. But when we reach out to God, when we start making our efforts, then God responds and moves mountains towards us. As he did for Jacob, he does for us. So he goes there, comes to the holiest place, and he goes to sleep. For 14 years, he didn't sleep. He was learning. For the next 20 years, he's not going to sleep. He's going to be working for 11 for 20 years. He doesn't sleep one wink for those 20 years. So 14 years, he doesn't sleep. He's learning. 20 years, he doesn't sleep. He's shepherding. This one night, he sleeps. Why is he sleeping? After 14 years of not sleeping because he's learning, why is he sleeping in this holy, holy place? Which he realized was so holy that he said, I'm going to walk back hours and hours and hours to go to this holy, holy place and daven, pray to God here. Because he understood that there was something he could accomplish by being up. But when he was sleeping, he could sort of allow himself to just be open to whatever energies God was going to give him, bigger than what he could accomplish on his own. So he's got, I just have one night here. I'm not going to waste the night being up. I'm going to sleep. Because as I sleep, then God could give me revelations of godliness even more than I could accomplish by being up. So he goes to sleep and he has this famous vision of a ladder of angels ascending and descending. And he has this whole relationship with God where God is really promising him that he's going to go into very, very hard stuff. He's going to, we can't even imagine 20 years in the house of 11. Thank God we can't imagine it. But God's going to be with him. And when Yaakov wakes up, he makes a vow. God's going to fill his end and he's going to fill his end and come back and serve God. Because he knew that was what was going to happen. So then he goes back where he was supposed to be, goes back all the way, walking back now to Haran, comes to Haran. At that time was the most evil place in the world, which again is why Jacob went there. as we were saying, he's like the primordial Jew, the paradigm of the Jew. So he's going specifically to the most evil place to transform it. It says till Jacob got there, it was Haran, was like from the Hebrew word anger, God's anger. And Jacob comes and transforms it. So Abraham didn't do that, and Isaac didn't do that. Specifically Yaakov, specifically Jacob is the one who's transforming this anger with 20 years of serving God. So he comes, he sees a bunch of shepherds. He sees 3 flocks, and the shepherds are just lazing around. He's like, what is going on here? It's the middle of the day. If you're working for someone, you're cheating them. If these are your own sheep, you're still being wrong. You're cheating the sheep. Sheep are supposed to graze all day. The only thing that he never saw something like this in his life, in the middle of the day, like high noon, and the shepherds are just hanging out with their sheep. He's like, they must all be about to go home. Why would they do that? They're wrong. You could say, why did Jacob get involved? Like, it's not his business, it's not his sheep. But that's a tzaddik. A truly godly person, it is his business. If he sees something wrong, it's his business. So since he was such a godly person, he had to do something about it. And they said, no, we're not. We know, of course, it's the middle of the day. We're not going home. But in this place, we have a very interesting custom. And it's very interesting because it really tells us the type of place he was going to. In those days, what it means to be a shepherd, you watched the sheep, they ate the grass, and you gave them to drink from the well. But not by Haran. By Haran, they were so cheap and dishonest. And the one that ultimately embodied this cheapness and dishonesty was Lavan. That they couldn't just have a well with water. Like, hey, maybe you're going to take more water than me. Maybe you're going to take all the water and my flocks won't get the water. Well, maybe you're going to take all the water and my flocks won't get the water. It was water. It doesn't cost them anything. They were so cheap. And they were so, if you're dishonest, then you assume everyone else in the world is dishonest. So they were so dishonest, they couldn't trust anyone because everyone they looked at was their mirrors. Everyone was so dishonest, as they all were. So what are we going to do about it? I don't know. How do I trust you? How do I trust you? What are we going to do? So they came up with this very unusual idea that nowhere in the world at that time was except in Haran. They found this massive rock and they put it over the well. And it was such a massive rock that it needed many people to lift it up. So the idea was the only way anyone's going to get to this water is if we're all here. Then we're all going to gather. We're going to all lift up the rock together. So we're all seeing what everyone's doing. So no one's taking more water than anyone else. We're going to put sheep, and then we're going to pick up again this massive rock and put it back down. So we're all safe. Now, again, this is ridiculous. This is water. They had water. It wasn't that they didn't have water. They were arguing over water. They were making their own lives miserable because they can only water their sheep once a day, and they had to wait, and they had to waste time. And it made no sense. They were messing themselves up. But you see what type of people they were. And Lavan was the worst of all. So this is really like a bird's eye view of what Jacob's going to be dealing with for 20 years. Because Lavan was probably like the one that made up this idea, He was probably the architect of this whole rock over the well plan. Because he was the most dishonest and stingy of them all. They were all like that. This was the place. That's why it was the place of God's anger, because the people were people that were inciting God's anger. Yaakov comes, he's like, what? Why are you here? I mean, like, go shepherd. What are you just hanging around like about to leave? If you're being hired, it's not honest. And if they're your own, it's not fair to the sheep. They said, no, we have to wait for all the shepherds to come. That's the plan, because no shepherd come. Can we lift this huge rock? Obviously, there were 3 shepherds there. 3 of us can't lift it. We need everyone to come, and then we can lift it. Okay, fine. And then Rachel shows up. Rachel, as hopefully we will have time to talk about, Rachel was the embodiment of the Jewish people. Rachel was the embodiment of God's trait of sovereignty, the 10th of God's 10 dimensions called Malchus sovereignty. Jacob sees Rachel and he's like, ooh, she's it. She's the reason I just spent 14 years learning day and night. Because why did he spend 14 years learning day and night? We said, well, to prepare to deal with Lavan, true, and to prepare to create the Jewish people. Because he was going to get married. He was 63 when he left his father's house. He's 77 now. He spent 14 years preparing to be able to have the energy to contend with Lavan, preparing to be able to start the Jewish people. And he knew it was with her. He looked at her, he knew it was with her. She was the one. She was the embodiment of the Jewish people. She was the embodiment of God's energy, that we the repository of the souls of the Jewish people. And when he did that, he just went over to that rock that 3 shepherds couldn't lift, and that it was designed that way, that only all the shepherds could lift. And he just picked it up, no big deal, and watered her sheep, and basically went back with her to Laban. And Rachel goes and runs and tells her father about this cool, amazing visitor, as he had told her, a relative, a cousin, her Laban's nephew. She's so excited. She's meeting this wonderful cousin. Laban's so excited because he remembered that when Eliezer, Abraham's servant, came, he was laden. He had 10 camels laden with wealth. That's just a servant. Imagine Jacob. He's the heir. He's the son. Whoa, must he be coming? And Laban, besides being incredibly cheap and incredibly dishonest, incredibly loved money. Very cheap, very dishonest, and pursued money. All go together. And he was like, oh, I want to welcome him personally. I want his money. And he comes. And basically, bottom line, he saw Jacob didn't have any money. Because Jacob didn't have any money, because as I think I mentioned last week, of course, he left his father's house with lots of money. His father was very, very wealthy. His father was sending him on a mission to get a wife. Of course, he left with tremendous wealth. As Isaac remembered, when Eliezer went for him to get married, his father gave him tremendous wealth. Abraham gave Eliezer tremendous wealth. So obviously, Isaac gave Jacob tremendous wealth. But basically, Esau, who really wanted to murder Jacob, so when he ran away, he thought this is perfect time to get rid of him, sends his son, very, very evil son, Eliphaz, to murder him. But because Eliphaz was raised by Isaac, there was still a little bit of humanity in him. So instead of murdering him, he stripped him literally bare. He literally took everything he had. Obviously, he didn't give any of this back to Esau. He kept it for himself. But he stripped him literally naked. Literally, he was walking naked until he found a dead man on the road, and he took his clothing. Literally had nothing. And then he spent 14 years learning. Obviously, he wasn't earning money there. So he came penniless. And he said to Laban, I have nothing, and explained why. So Laban, with his heart of stone, is like, well, I mean, I'm not going to throw you on the streets. You could stay with me. Of course, you're going to work for your keep, but, I'm still being very generous because I'm allowing you to stay with me. So for a month, that's what he did. He worked. He was the shepherd. He stayed a month, and Laban's getting suspicious. Now, again, dishonest people view everyone as dishonest. So since Laban was so dishonest, he was sure Jacob was also very dishonest. He's like, this makes no sense. Why is this guy working here for free? I mean, yeah, I'm saying it's enough room and board, but I know it's not enough. Obviously, you're supposed to pay someone. So there must be some plot here going on. Like, why is he just working and not asking me for money? So I know he's going to try to trick me. So I'm going to preempt him. So he says, like, I have to pay you, wanting to stop whatever trick he knew Jacob was going to pull on him. And Jacob said, well, fine, I'll work for one of your daughters. I'll work for Rachel. And Laban said, oh, good deal. Whew, 7 years work for her. In those days, obviously, you're supposed to give a dowry with a girl. You're going to work for 7 years for the girl? Oh, this is right up Laban's alley. Perfect. And Jacob works for 7 years, day and night, for Rachel. He literally says, he testifies, and he was the embodiment of honesty. Didn't sleep for 7 years because obviously I was responsible for those sheep by day and by night. If anything happens to sheep, it's my fault. For 7 years. Now you think if he's wanting to marry Rachel, that's why he's doing this, wanting to marry Rachel. He's 77. Now, by the time he can marry her, he's going to be 84. You think every day would stretch and stretch and stretch. When are these 7 years going to be over? When can I marry my intended, my soulmate, the embodiment of the Jewish people, the embodiment of God's energy of sovereignty, Rachel? But that's not what the verse says. The verse says something very interesting. The verse says, and these 7 years were like a few days in his eyes because of his enormous love for Rachel. Any thoughts on that? Why would you think he's older and he wants to create the Jewish people, 12 tribes, so he wants to get married, and he knows Rachel's the one, and he's working for 7 years so he can marry her? So any ideas why? Any thoughts why they would seem so short? You'd think it'd be so long, these 7 years, and it felt to him so fast. Any thoughts how it could be so fast? How do you think they were fast and not slow?
Because he enjoyed his time.
Why would he enjoy his time being a shepherd?
He was learning a lot of Torah.
Okay, but you could still say, okay, so from us starting us on the right thoughts, from us saying he enjoyed his time, he was learning Torah, which he of course was. I mean, he wasn't wasting his time. Nowadays, like you'd say, oh, if you're a shepherd or such a job like that, maybe modern days say mashgiach, plenty of time to just be on your phone. So plenty of time to study when you're out there with the sheep, plenty of the time to commune with God, for sure, true. But why was it like sitting on his hands? I mean, he wanted to marry Rachel.
He was happy that he found the right wife.
He knew he found the right wife. So you think if he knew he found the right wife, he'd be like, when are we gonna get married already? Oh my gosh, another day. Oh, it's a year. That means I have 6 more to go. Now it was half a year. Now it's 5.5 more to go. How was it so fast to him? What could make time go fast? What makes time go fast? When does time seem to zip by? When we're what?
He was in love.
Well, he was in love, then I think he was in love. But I think if he was in love, he would be like, oh my gosh, 6 years and 100 days till we can get married. Oh no, now it's 6 years
He
and
was
99
having
days
fun.
till we can get married. What makes time seem fast? When you're what?
When you're having fun.
You're having fun? I don't know if he was having fun. He was being a shepherd by day and by night in the heat and in the cold. I don't think it was fun. I think he was busy. I think when you're busy, then time goes fast. Like when it's almost Shabbos and suddenly time goes really fast because you're really busy. He was busy. Well, what was he busy with for 7 years? He was busy preparing himself to get married. His whole perspective was, I am building the Jewish people. I've only 7 years left to be ready. I mean, I've been working my whole life on this. When he left his father at 63, he was perfectly holy. He spent another 14 years preparing. He was 77. I'm about to start this monumental thing to create the Jewish people, to produce the souls of the Jewish people. Yes. So he was busy. He wasn't wasting time. He wasn't bored. He wasn't languishing. He was in love. So you think if he was in love, he would feel longer, but no, because he felt so like what I have to accomplish with this mere 7 years left. And then we got to create the Jewish people. So he worked and worked and worked and worked. And there you blink and 7 years are over and that's it. He's ready and it's already 8:30. So I should move more quickly on this overview because we're not going to have time to for more things. But okay, so it's over. 7 years are over. And Lavan tricks him. Now, of course, he knew Lavan was going to try to trick him. Yaakov understood Lavan very, very, very well. Yaakov was the embodiment of honesty, but he understood the dishonesty very well. I mean, he was raised with a twin brother, Esau, he knew what he was dealing with. He wasn't this naive, innocent. And he did many, many, many things to make sure, and he was sure that Lavan was going to give him Leah. Here he had Leah, this older daughter that no one's marrying. Here he has Yaakov that worked for 7 years. Oh, and then he would like slip him Leah. Oh, you wanted one of my daughters. Well, I changed her name. Now we call her Rachel. You wanted Rachel, my daughter. She's my daughter and her name's Rachel. I just named her this morning, Rachel. What's the problem? So Yaakov knew what he was dealing with. So Yaakov had made signs. He said, the only one I can trust her in this world in Haran is Rachel. So he had given Rachel signs because then Lavan couldn't trick him. It says, so here becomes Rachel's wedding day. And Rachel sees they're not getting her dressed up. She's probably shoved in a room somewhere and not allowed out. So she shouldn't ruin the plot. Lavan probably didn't trust her either. And she sees her dressing up Leah as the bride. And she understands what's happening. And she knows, but I have the signs. And she knows that, well, Leah's going to go and she's not going to know the signs. She's not going to know the code. Some say the code is that Yaakov told her these are the 3 commandments of a woman. The commandments of separating the challah, family purity, and lighting the candles of the Shabbos. Maybe he told her the acronym for that, which is Hachen, the beauty, the grace. And she's probably locked in a room somewhere, and Leah's going to go, but she knows she has the sign. So she knows she's safe because Leah's not going to be able to whisper those signs when Yaakov's like the code. Leah's not going to know. And then she's thinking, wait, and what's going to happen to my sister? In front of everyone, Yaakov's going to say, this isn't Rachel. This isn't the one I worked for 7 years. I'm not marrying her. And Leah's going to be shamed like that in front of everyone. And she did something that the older I get and the more I think about it, the more it overwhelms me with the sacrifice. I said Rachel embodies the Jewish people. I think this is like such an unbelievable example of martyrdom, voluntary martyrdom. She says, Leah, I have something to tell you. And she told her the signs. Because I don't want my sister to be embarrassed like that. Now, we know the storyline, or some of us know the storyline, and we know that she does become Yaakov's wife. She didn't know the storyline. She didn't know that Yaakov would forgive her. Yaakov worked 7 years for her. And now she was part of the trick. Lavan, of course, was the mastermind of the trick. Leah was going along with the deception. And so did Rachel. Rachel gave the signs. Rachel participated in the deception. So she had no clue if Yaakov would forgive her, if Yaakov would want her. And if he would want her, she had no clue if her father would agree because her father was so evil. And the rumor on the street was that Rivka has 2 sons and Lavan has 2 daughters and 1 for 1. That's why it says Leah was crying her whole life because she thought she was going to wind up Esau's wife, which spiritually said was true. And her tears changed that. So maybe she's going to wind up Esau's wife. She doesn't know if Lavan would agree. She doesn't know if Yaakov will want. She doesn't know what's going to be. And she still sacrificed. She completely sacrificed herself for her sister. Unbelievable. It's just something that we can say it's in our blood. It's in our blood. Very, very, very deep in our blood is that pure ability to put ourselves aside for someone else. I don't know if anyone's experienced something like that, where they've had to make a very hard choice to put themselves aside for someone else.
Sarah, I saw it resonates with me when you said the older you get, the more you appreciate Rachel's sacrifice. It's exactly how I feel. It's just so overwhelming to think about it. It just, and I was thinking, did they both were our matriarchs, and Leah also, I was just thinking, showing, love and care for her sister. And what I was thinking is when Rachel was pregnant with her second child, Leah prophetically knew that that child is going to be a girl, and Leah didn't want Rachel to be outnumbered by maidservants. She wanted her to have a boy, and Leah was pregnant at the same time, and she prayed that God would switch their babies. Is that? And
Not exactly. You're
boy,
loosely correct. Some
so
of the details are
Leah
off,
was
but Leah
praying for
prayed,
Rachel.
as I had hoped we would talk about. We might not get to it. Leah prayed that she at that time Rachel was completely barren. She didn't have any children, and Leah was carrying her seventh child, and she knew that if this child was a boy, then there's only one boy left, because she knew there would be 12 tribes.
Yeah.
So she was like, my sister's not even going to have two like the two maidservants do. So she prayed, and that child became a girl. That child became Dinah, which I did want to talk about if we'll get to it. So you're right. It did go in both directions. It absolutely did. That's actually interesting, because there's a whole discussion on how Jacob could marry two sisters, because according to the law of Torah, you can't marry two sisters. And the patriarchs kept the Torah. It wasn't given to them. It wasn't commanded. It was voluntary. It was optional, but they kept it. So how did Jacob go against the Torah and marry two sisters? So many commentators give answers, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe discusses this, and he, shows flaws in many of the others' answers, and he gives a very profound answer. And the answer he gives is, and the reason I'm bringing this because of what Rivka said, is that the basic answer was that Jacob had given his word. Everyone knew that he had promised he would marry Rachel. I mean, the whole town knew about it. The whole town was part of the trick. As we said, they were all very lovely people. So now, after Lavan tricked him with Leah, I mean, Lavan was planning the whole time on giving him Rachel afterwards for another 7 years. So after he tricked him with Leah, when Lavan was willing to give him another 7 years for Rachel, if he had said, no, I'm not doing that, people would say he was being dishonest. Now, of course, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world, because he honestly worked for 7 years and they were all dishonest. But still, that's how people twist things, which would have been a tremendous disgrace to God, because he represents God. So he couldn't make a disgrace on God's name. But you're not married two sisters. Yeah, but that's optional. Yeah, but you keep the whole Torah. Yeah, but disgracing God's name is a far greater problem than doing something optional. But there's a reason why God said you can't marry two sisters. True. What's the reason why you can't marry two sisters? So the reason given, like, why can't you marry two sisters? It's not like an incestuous concept. It's one man with two sisters. What's the problem? So the problem is because if a man has more than one wife, there's a natural rivalry between the women. And God wouldn't want to make sisters rivals. And therefore, you can't marry two sisters, so you shouldn't take sisters and make them rivals. So Jacob knew, obviously not what Dinah would do, because that didn't happen yet, but already based on what Rachel had done, what Rachel had done, that between these sisters, there was no rivalry. That if Rachel had so sacrificed her whole future, not just the future of this life, the whole future forever. Because if she marries Jacob's wife, she's the mother of the Jewish people. If she marries Esau, she's doomed forever. So she loses in this world, she loses in the next world. She's lost everything. Here she'd gain everything. And if she gave all that up for her sister, he knew there was no issue here of rivalry. And that's how he was able to marry these two women who were sisters. So you're absolutely right. It did go in both directions. But anyone have an experience where they were the benefits of someone's sacrifice, or they sacrificed and really put themselves aside for someone else, or someone else really sacrificed and put themselves aside for them? This is in our blood. These are our mothers.
I think most mothers do that.
You're saying it's just what every mother does for her children.
Yeah, for your children. I mean, well, also your spouse. I think women naturally do that for their spouse and their children. I think women are less
There's a truth to that.
selfish. Yeah, I
There's a
think.
truth to that. We do sacrifice for our children. We could all go around and think of our sacrifices for our children. I think From is saying something very true that we all can relate to. Absolutely. Anyone else? Worth thinking about because it's in our blood. In our blood, and From is saying, I think he's absolutely right. We do sacrifice for our children for sure, but it's very deep in our blood. This is Rachel. She embodied the Jewish people, and you see in her blood is just total negation of self, total putting herself aside for someone else. That's us. That's in our blood. That quality. And if you recognize it or not, if you see it or
But
not,
it's more of a woman
us.
one, right? It's more of a woman quality, not a man one.
It's easier for women because it is the quality of complete nullification of self for someone else. And it's easier for women to nullify themselves than for men. It's harder for men. But since Rachel embodied the Jewish people, every Jewish man also has this ability. But it's probably harder for him to access it because he has to get through the more natural ego that maybe is more naturally what he's relating to. But underneath that, he also has this ability to completely put himself aside for someone else. And there's so many people that do. Like you're saying, just as you could say, a mother to her children, there's so many, I just think of all the Rebbe's emissaries that will drive for hours to help one Jew do one mitzvah. They're not getting anything for it, not fame, not glory, not honor, not money. They do it. Why? Because he's a Jew, serves to a mitzvah. That's completely putting yourself aside for someone else. So I think it's in our world and it's in every one of us. We all have this quality. Wow, it's so late. I have so much I wanted to say. There's so little time. All right. So the next morning, okay, now we're doing a fast forward rendition because there were some things I want to speak a little bit more about. I don't know. We'll see. The next morning, well, he realizes in the morning it's Leah. By night, he was busy doing all the spiritual holy things, so he wasn't as focused. But in the morning, he definitely realized it was Leah. And then he goes to Lavan, and Lavan's like, well, what do you want? I was supposed to give you the younger daughter. We did make that up, but whatever. I didn't think he really mind because, how can I marry the younger before the older? We don't do that. That's not nice. Oh, but listen, I have a brilliant solution. I'm even going to trust your honesty, having seen you for 7 years. Wait a week. This is the first time we see the concept of Sheva Brachas. In the Jewish tradition, we have a week of celebrating a marriage. This is the first one we see it at, the marriage of Yaakov and Leah. They, so to speak, party for a week. We're going to celebrate for a week, and then you can marry Rachel. We also learn from here something else. Very interesting how these laws, there's things in our weddings today that date back to Jacob and Rachel and Leah. One is what I just said, Sheva Brachas, that we have a week of parties. The first time we see that is literally, it's written biblically. You're going to celebrate the marriage for a week, and then you can marry Rachel. We also learn from this that you can't mix parties. Meaning, well, why couldn't he be partying with Leah's marriage and also marry Rachel? No, we don't mix them. We're going to celebrate. That's going to be over. Then we'll start the next round. So for example, if two siblings both are engaged and they both want to get married, and let's say one wants June 1st and one wants June 3rd. Well, no, we do a week of Sheva Brachos. So you make your Sheva Brachos by the sibling's wedding. What's the problem? We don't mix. You get your week, and only a week later can your sibling get married. Something else we do until today that dates back to this is it's a term in the Jewish, we call it the badekin, which is that before the chuppah, the man comes to lift up the veil and see the face of the bride. This originates all the way back to here. We want to make sure we got the right one. I've seen many deep spiritual levels of meaning here, but we're checking, making sure this is the right one, all the way back to when our forefather got another one. If you've ever been to Sephardic weddings, where they by the chuppah the women do something like that? say that takes back to this also. It's a Sephardic custom. It's not an Ashkenazi custom. And it says that the people of the town were like sort of, if you will, playing with him. And they were saying, lay, 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 lay. But you couldn't catch what they were saying. But they were saying it. So like, again, that's like the deception. Like, we told you it was lay the whole night. Oh, you didn't understand. Oh, sorry. So till this day in the Sephardic weddings, they say that same like lay, 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 lay chant, dating all the way back. But that's what happened. A week for Leah, he gets married, he gets off maybe a week from work, and then he works for another 7 years as honestly as before. You think, oh my gosh, working 7 years is crazy. I mean, they're supposed to give a dowry with a girl, and you're not supposed to pay for it and pay for 7 years. And now he got tricked into another 7 years. He was embodiment of honesty. By day and by night, I said he didn't sleep. He was in Love's house for 20 years. He claims, and he's honest, he didn't sleep. He was watching the sheep all day and all night. And then, now it says that all of the matriarchs were barren. Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, all of them were barren. They were all barren because in essence, God wants to hear their prayers. God wants their prayers. But even though Leah was as barren as Rachel, Sarah, and Rebecca, right away, God gives her a child. Why? Because obviously, Jacob might have had not such great feelings about the situation of being married to her. So therefore, God wanted to compensate. And if she's the mother of his son, obviously the love's going to come. And then she got another son, and then she got another son, and then she got another son. She got 4 sons, boom, boom, boom. We're told they were 7 months apart, each one, to really just give so many reasons that Yaakov truly, honestly did feel such love for her as the mother of his children, which is what happened, which didn't take away at all his love for Rachel. He loved Rachel unbelievably, even more, but he also had such love for Leah as the mother of his children. Now, all of the matriarchs were prophetesses. We spoke last week about Rebecca's prophecies. So they all knew there were going to be 12 tribes. So Leah figured 4 wives, 12 tribes, each one gets 3. She got Reuben, she got Shimon, she got Levi, boom, boom, boom. And then she gets Yehuda. She's like, whoa, why am I getting a 4th child? I should only have, I got 3. I know my husband totally loves me, so it's not like God's doing this for more love. I feel the love. I know I'm loved. Why did I get Yehuda? And she said an unbelievable statement. She said, Hapam oda es Hashem. Now I'm thanking Hashem. He gave me more than my portion. He gave me more than I deserve because I should get 3. 4 divided by 12 is 3. I got 4. Why am all of the tribes and all of the names, lots of symbolisms. The reason I'm talking about this one specifically is because that's what we're called. Jews in Hebrew are called Yehudim. The first time we actually see that term is in the Megillah, Yehudi. That's the Hebrew term for Jew, is a Yehudi. Where does the term Yehudi come? From the word Yehuda. Why are we called Yehudim? Why aren't we called Reuvenim or Shimonim or Leviim? Why are we called Yehudim? We're called Yehudim because of this quality. This is the Jewish quality. We spoke a little bit before about Rachel and her complete nullification for another person, and that's a very Jewish quality, which it is. But this is our name. Now I am thanking God because he gave me more than I deserve. He gave me more than I anticipated. He gave me more than I ever thought I would get. And what do? I say thank you. Our sages say until Leah said that, no one ever thanked God like that before, which is sort of bizarre. We always had holy people in the world, and we had Abram, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, Adam, Shem, Hanoch, Methuselah. There were holy people throughout all of humanity. And Leah was the first one that said, God, thank you for giving me this undeserved gift. I don't think she was the first one that said thank you to God, but thank you for giving me more than my expectations. Thank you for giving something I feel like totally didn't deserve. I was totally not expecting, and you gave it to me. That's being a Jew. That's literally our name, Yehuda, Yehudim. because we look at our life and we thank Hashem. Now, obviously, that's something we talk a lot about in this class, and I've very many times pushed the point. Who here, from all of the times I've discussed it, has either done what I suggested and like actually have a notebook and write in it, or at least take a time every day and thank God? You could raise your virtual hand or raise your physical hand for the 2 people that I get to see their face.
I don't do it every day, but I do it a lot.
All right, so I got one sort of, and I'm waiting for anyone else. Does that mean nobody here does it? Oh no, that's horrible. Or it's very good that we're talking about this. Anyone else? You can raise a virtual hand, you can raise a physical hand, or you cannot because you don't do it.
I mean, I pray every day and I thank God when I read Psalms and just pray before. Is it count?
When you
Does
read
it
the
count?
Psalms, do you stop and think of specific things that you're grateful for, like every day, or you just in general are
Yeah.
grateful for God?
Before each psalm, I just pray with my own words before I
But I'm
read.
saying, I'm not only talking about prayer, I'm talking about thanking God, thanking for
Yeah.
the good that you have.
In addition, yeah,
Okay,
I'm
that
thinking.
counts.
Thank you.
I thank God multiple times.
Yeah,
I
how do
think
you do it? Also just in your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I do it at night. I write it down, but every night. But well, maybe not every night, a couple times a week in my book. But all day long. I got a parking spot. I thank God. I didn't get hit by the
Undeserved
car.
kindness, a
I
parking
thank
spot, and
God.
what's Roger's story?
I mean,
Yes.
like, I thank God for everything, literally everything. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Same here. I thank God every day, many times a day. And
You're
every
saying, Menucha, you thank God as things happen, or like Faggy said that you have a time in your day, like she said, when she says Psalm, she stops and she thanks God.
in the morning when I put tzedakah, I have 5, so I thank God. And like in my mind, it's all the time that I'm grateful. Driving, parking, working.
It's really good. So people are doing it, Menucha's doing it, and Simcha's doing it, and Fruma's doing it, and Faggy's doing it. People are doing it.
I'm also doing it more like Simcha said, that little things, thinking for little things, like she said,
We all have that our whole life, all day long. Like, I was so grateful this morning. Oh my gosh. Whatever. Dober had this horrible diaper. And I was like so grateful every morning he takes off his diaper. This morning he didn't. Thank you, God. I was so grateful. There's lots of gratitudes all day long.
Also, when I put tzedakah in every single morning, I thank God for many things. Like,
So you're saying as you're putting the coins in, you're using that as an
Yes.
opportunity to thank God. I do that also as I'm putting coins in. I mean, I have lots and lots of coins I put in every day. And then I have like extras for all the like special kindnesses that I'm appreciative. And sometimes like I reflect, and it's fine if like 3 days in a row I put in a coin for something, because it just shows I'm very, very grateful. Because I am. And that's why I put in a coin again. I put in a coin again. I'm really grateful. God appreciates that. This is us, ladies. This is being a Jew. Okay? Just like we said, Rachel means sacrificing yourself for someone else in the most literal sense. And that's us. And I'm sure every one of us has done that, but we're going to start tooting our own horn and saying all our great sacrifices. Like, that would feel weird. This is Yehuda. This is the energy of the Jew. This is literally our name. Our name, our energy is stopping and appreciating and feeling overwhelmed by God's kindnesses, and make up some time. In other words, it's good as it happens to stop and recognize it, like not just to take for granted there was a parking spot, or to take for granted that, I call this doctor's office today, I'm just saying a little example. And I wanted an appointment for my son specifically on the 1 week that he's off from his therapy in his public school. Last week of December, like I was sure, like everybody wants appointments then, and the doctors are on vacation then. And lo and behold, they actually had an appointment that day. I was like, wow, thank you, God. So obviously, thank you, God. So as things happen, you stop and you're like, wow, I don't take that for granted. Thank you, God. At the same time, You should find a point in your day. It's your thing. That's when you, I would say, write it, or at least go through the list. All the things that happened today that you said, thank you for God as they happened, review them. Or if it's in the morning yesterday, so you're driving to work, you're driving back from work. Faye says she does it as she says Tehillim, Psalms, Menucha, and Simcha. I think Menucha and Simcha both said they do it as they give charity. Just fine. You found your time of the day. When you pray, you should have a time of day before you go. Simcha said she writes in her book before she goes to sleep at night. Have your time of day when I at least think through all the good that God did for me today. I thanked him every time. But a gratitude is more meaningful if it's also later. Just like in human relationships, I try when I'm being good and focused to not just like praise my child at the moment for whatever they did, but later to like mention it to my husband or mention it to my mother-in-law. So they should know, like, I really appreciate it because I even remembered it a few hours later. So it was real, it wasn't fake. So same thing with us and God. Thanking at that time is good, but saying the next morning, I'm still remembering and I'm still feeling warmed by the glow, by the sunshine of your kindness to me, that's very powerful. And therefore, everyone should commit to a time. If you're driving to work and anyone not going to write it down, great time. Doing the dishes, in prayer, before you go to sleep at night is a great time. Even better time is in the morning when you wake up, because then it centers your whole day. Your day starts with an up. Your day starts with happiness, with gratitude. So it's good to find a time. You're a Yehudi. This is your energy. This is your essence. This is your name. There's a reason that's our name. So we should all live up to it, and we'll see the glow. Like as we more and more thank, we more and more feel how truly blessed our lives really are. Okay. Going back to the storyline. So Leah has 4 and then she stops. Okay, she had no complaints. And then Rachel sees she's not having any. So she gives her maidservant Bilhah, who has 2. And then Leah says, oh, that worked for her. I'm going to give my maidservant, because it was sort of Bilhah's, but it's sort of like Rachel's because it's Rachel's maidservant. So surrogate. So Leah gives her maidservant. Both these women were also very worthy. They were also indirectly Lavan's daughters as well. A lot of connection going on there. A lot of love and energy. So weird. And then Zilpah has 2. Great. So Zilpah and Bilhah both have 2, no problem. And they weren't the matriarchs. They weren't barren. Leah had 4 and Rachel's still barren. And then we have a very interesting incident in the Torah. Very, 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 very interesting incident. Now again, Leah had stopped having children. She had no complaints. She had her 4 sons, and they each were born with a twin girl. So her daughters, her sons, she had plenty of children. But she had stopped having children. And she had given her maidservant. She had 2, so she has 2 more sort of surrogate. And then it's the time of the spring, and there are these type of flowers. Different commentators say what the flowers were. I'm not going to give an opinion. I'm going to call them their Hebrew name, Dudaim. And Reuben gathers up the Dudaim. It was a harvest time. He wasn't going to steal and take something valuable like wheat, but he took these flowers to give them to his mother. Rachel sees Rachel wants them. Why does Rachel want them? Because Rachel knows that they have a certain potency to cause someone to give birth. You probably made them into a tea or something in some fashion, drank them, got their energy, and this would help giving birth. So it's not like Rachel said, oh, they're such a pretty bouquet, I want them, like what's she taking her sister's bouquet for? But her sister has 4 kids, she doesn't have any. So obviously she was praying to God, obviously she was doing whatever she could, but you do whatever natural means are available, so she wanted the flowers. And Leah said, well, if you want these Dudaim, I want your night tonight with Jacob. That's a very interesting thing, because again, now Jacob has in a sense 4 wives, really 2, Rachel and Leah, plus Bilhah and Zilpah at a much lesser level. So they had different nights with him. And this was Rachel's night. And Leah said, if you want my flowers, I want your night. Now you can say, well, what did Rachel give up her night for? But Rachel knew these flowers, I guess they weren't so easy to find, and they would help her have a child, and that's what she wants. So if she has to sacrifice, have a child, she did it. So she said, okay. And then Jacob's coming back from the field. Now he doesn't know what's going on. Now Leah knows he's going to go to Rachel's tent. Well, that would be weird. He goes to Rachel's tent and then Rachel says, oh, by the way, I sold you tonight for these flowers. I bartered you. So she goes out and she says, no, I got you tonight in lieu for these dudaim. You're with me tonight. And it seems maybe like a little inappropriate, like strange. Like, why is Leah doing this? Like, why she just give her sister the flowers? My gosh, she has 4 boys. Her sister's childless. She can't give her the flowers. But she really wanted another night with Jacob because even though she had 4 sons, she really wanted more. Someday she knew that night was a special night that would help produce children. But God obviously felt what she was doing was correct because from that night with Jacob, she did have another child. And then after that, she had another one. So it's almost like we could almost look and say, wow, how do you know when something's correct or incorrect? Because what she's doing, we could say that doesn't sound very modest, doesn't sound very refined, doesn't seem how we're supposed to behave. But it was correct. As we see, God gave her a child because of it. So any thoughts on that? How do you know when it's correct or not correct?
I was always thinking, why did Leah act unkindly to Rachel? That was my thought.
Like if she really knew it was a special night, she just said, no, you keep this night. This night,
Yeah,
take my flowers and keep the night. You have the physical component, you have the spiritual component, you'll have a child.
right. On the other hand, Hashem was not pleased with Rachel that she so easily gave up the night with her husband.
Right. It says that's why Rachel
That's
wasn't
why she
buried
was
with
not
him.
buried. Yeah. So,
But then you say, was Rachel doing something wrong? Rachel wanted to have a child. She
Yeah.
viewed these dudaim as a means to have a child. She was sacrificing she should have a child. It's very hard to know. Any other thoughts on that? How do you know when something like this is correct or not correct? When you're in this situation, where does this seem right? Doesn't seem right, but here it was right. So how do you know something, some of these great things, if they're right or wrong? Any thoughts on that?
well, Yaakov wouldn't have been buried with both wives anyway, because it just wasn't proper, right?
So again, I think what you're pointing out there is, so it's interesting what Rivka's saying. Rivka's saying, on one hand, God said, oh, it was so easy for you to give up being with Jacob, so fine, you don't have to be with him forever because he's going to be buried with Leah instead. At the same time, Rivka's saying, well, God had to only bury him with one. So you can say, so why is Leah gypped? Well, why is Rachel gypped? Well, why should Leah be gypped? But was Rachel really gypped? Rachel, it says, is buried on the road, as we say, Mama Rachel, everyone's mother, that everyone can come and pray. It says when the Jews were going to exile, they passed by her grave and they prayed. And she's the one that it says that her voice is heard by God more than any of the other patriarchs and matriarchs. She said, God, I gave up my husband. You can't give up, you can't, because the Jews are serving idols. I gave up a lot more. Like, I did it. You could do it. And God said to you, I have to listen. So I think sometimes that sort of points out the, like, I don't know how to say it simply what Rivka's saying, but I think it's a very deep, real concept. I'm going to try to just point out what she's saying because it's very true. On one hand here, God can't have Jacob have with 2 women in the burial tomb, if only with 1 woman. But at the same time here, when Rachel does this act, God could say, oh, because of that, you're not going to be. In the end, he needed her not there anyway. But it all has to work out. Well, why should she lose out? So therefore, she did something which gives God the excuse. But then, was it a bad thing? She didn't really do anything bad. Well, it's actually not a bad thing that she's buried there because it actually helps all the Jewish people. See how complicated it gets? So it's the same true for us in our lives. I have seen this in my life. I don't know if any of you have experienced this. I have experienced this very strongly. I've thought about this idea many times. Something's supposed to happen. God has his plans. God has his vision. But you have to, so to speak, deserve whatever he's giving you. So God sometimes creates scenarios that you either do the wrong thing and never deserve to lose something, or do a very good thing and deserve a very good thing. But it's all part of God's train. But you have to do the bad or the good to allow that train to proceed. So God creates scenarios and you sort of make your free choices, but somehow your free choices just align with that total plan for your life and for the history of all of humanity, because we're all part of creating the history of humanity. Does it make any sense what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm trying to bring out? Anyone following this idea? Maybe it's not clear. I'll move on. But it's very interesting what you're saying, Rivka, because I do think it is exactly this in all of our lives. Maybe you don't see it so clearly. We make choices. We do right things. We do wrong things. Because we do wrong things, sometimes we suffer. Because we do right things, we receive tremendous blessings. But sometimes you look and you say, but wait, God really wanted this to unfold. So therefore, he created a backdrop that I would make choices. I'm a free player. I made free choices, but I made free choices to the right or to the wrong that allowed the storyline to continue. Okay. So it's 9:07. We're trying to get back to our rendition of the Torah portion. So then Leah had another baby, because God sees she so much desires to have children that was so pleasing in God's eyes. So she had 2 boys. So now we have, Leah has 6, Bilhah has 2, Zilpah has 2. They're only going to be 12. The 10 already born. Leah has 6, Bilhah got 2, Zilpah got 2. Bilhah and Zilpah are the maids and partial wives. So there's 10 children born. From the 12, they'll be the Jewish people. Rachel's still barren. And then Leah gets pregnant again. And Leah knew it was a boy. She was a prophetess. She knew it was a boy. And she said, wait, now I'm going to have 11. There's be 11. There's only be 1 left. Even if Rachel has that 1, she's only going to have 1 child. Bilhah got 2. Zilpah got 2. Rachel's only going to have 1. I can't do that to my sister. So she prayed. Dinah was a boy. There was a boy in her fetus. And she prayed, and God changed the boy to a girl. It has a lot to do with Dinah's energy, that she really started off as a boy. But she prayed, and God changed her to a girl. So here, where Rachel still doesn't have any, and there's only 2 boys left, should at least have as many as Bilhah and Zilpah. She didn't feel as bad, but she only got 1 when everyone else had at least 2. Which again shows, I mean, here on one hand we're saying, well, Leah wasn't so nice with this whole night with the Judaism. And we could wonder, though obviously God thought it was good. So obviously it was good. We wonder, but it was good because we know God knows what he's doing. But here, she prayed, which is sort of an interesting thought also, because we could say, well, God has a plan. What are you getting involved in God's plans? If God wants you to have 7 boys and Rachel to have 1, that's God's plan. What are you getting involved in? Like, leave it to God. And sometimes we do have that attitude and we're like, it's God's plan. I'll just leave it to him. And yet Leah felt, no, I'm going to get involved because God wants our prayers. She knew God listens to prayers because she was destined to marry Esau. She was. And she prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And she became the wife of Jacob and the mother of 6 of the 12 tribes. So God listens to prayers. We see that very clearly from Leah. God listens to prayers. And also we see that from Rachel because she prayed and prayed and prayed to be able to have a child. Okay. So then finally after this, Rachel's remembered. And Rachel has a son. He was Joseph. He was Yosef. And now Jacob said, okay, I'm ready to leave. I know I'm not going to finish the Torah portion. I'm just going to finish with this one idea because it continues. But I see it's already late. Jacob says, I'm ready to leave. And that's how it's written in the Torah portion. Joseph is born. Joseph is born. And Jacob says, I'm ready to leave. Now, if you calculate the years, exactly when Joseph was born, his years were up. He committed to working for 7 and 7, in essence, 14 years. So right when Joseph was born, it was the end of the 14 years. So the verse should have said, and the 14 years were over, And Jacob said, bye. But that's not what the verse says. The verse says, and Joseph was born. And then Jacob said, bye. Meaning, of course, as I was just saying about God and his plots, God made it work perfectly that the 14 years are over exactly as Joseph is born. Because he can't leave till the 14 years are over. But he also couldn't leave until Joseph was born. And that's why the verse gives Joseph the credit instead of the 14 years. So God dovetails everything. God makes it all work out perfectly, total synchronized. Why couldn't Jacob leave? Because Jacob knew there was an Esau lurking in the background. He didn't even say officially what was he worried about. Like, I mean, come on, bygones, bygones. It's been a long time, or whatever. God will protect him. Jacob knew Esau. They were twins. He knew him very well. He knew he wanted to destroy him. And he knew he was not safe to leave. Again, you see how everything works out. Like, he was stuck in the house of Laban, but really he couldn't leave the house of Laban because he couldn't leave until Joseph was born. Because Joseph embodied the energy that would destroy Esau. When Joseph was born, a newborn baby, Jacob knew he could leave. What was so special about his energy? Well, we see the verse by Obadiah, who was a Roman convert. So coming from the seed of Esau, he could talk about the destruction of Esau. He said, the house of Jacob will be fire, and the house of Joseph will be the flame, and the house of Esau will be the straw. So fire consumes straw, but without a flame, it doesn't go anywhere. So Joseph is Jacob's flame. Joseph is taking Jacob's energy and having it consume all that straw, all that force of Esau. Why? For many reasons, but since it's late, I'm going to tell you one. Because Joseph was the main energy of Rachel. It was Rachel's firstborn. She had two sons. He was the first one. Rachel was, I told you, the embodiment of the Jewish people and the embodiment of God's sovereignty. And as God's sovereignty is a very interesting concept. God's sovereignty is the 10th final, lowest of his 10 energies. Starts off with seminal wisdom, it goes to understanding, to integration. The 10th and final, seemingly least lowest, is sovereignty. Now, sovereignty, whoa, that's like being a king, that's the highest. Yeah, ultimately, by the times of the Mashiach, by the times of redemption, it will be expressed as what it truly is, the highest. But now, in the state of exile, it seems the lowest. Because in exile, it's an upside down world. And what's really high seems low, and what's really low seems high. So sovereignty seems the lowest. And therefore, it's the 10th. And this was Rachel's energy. And this was Joseph's energy, which is the energy of Mashiach. Who's the embodiment of sovereignty? The Jewish people. As we said, Rachel is the embodiment of the Jewish people. So we're all sovereignty. The Jewish people seem the lowest, the constantly persecuted, constantly despised, and of course the highest, God's chosen only child. Women, historically, women versus men, women were looked down upon as the weaker, the inferior, the less capable. Of course, we know the truth. The moon versus the sun. We're told the moon has officially no light of its own. It's just reflecting the sun's light. By Mashiach, it will be revealed to be equal and actually greater. As King David, as I know we've discussed in this class, was viewed as far inferior to his 7 brothers. And of course, the truth was the opposite, that they were all very righteous and holy people. This is the energy of Mashiach. What seems the lowest is revealed as what it really is, the highest. That's why it says that by Mashiach, the women will be dominant for the same reason. And this was actually Joseph's life, because Joseph was the holiest of the 12 sons of Jacob. Joseph is the one that we say about him, the tzaddik, the holiest one. And his brothers totally didn't understand him and thought he was really a not good person, up to not good, nefarious schemes against them. Same idea. He is the highest, and they're viewing him as the lowest. He has the highest energy. They think he has the least energy. He's the greatest, and he's totally not appreciated. as happened to David, as happens to women, as happens to the moon, as happens to the Jewish people. So it's really, Joseph is our energy. Joseph is this energy of something that's viewed as lower and really is far higher. And that again is the history of the Jewish people and the history of every one of us. And it's really an introspective point. So I guess it's a good point to end on. This idea of, do we sometimes fall for this? Do we sometimes view something as far less valuable than it really is? Maybe a mitzvah, a way of serving God. And we're like, yeah, well, that would be a nice thing. Sometimes I have time for it. Sometimes it fits into my life. Sometimes it doesn't. If we only understood its real worth, it would be no compromising, no giving up, that ability to do that act that's going to change eternity. But we don't realize what it really is. So we bother, don't bother. Many details in our life could be like that. You know, someone passes away. Then you think, when was the last time I spoke to them? And maybe it was a long time ago. And you're like, oh, I could have reached out, but I didn't bother. Or you think back and you're like, oh, thank God, I actually just spoke to them recently. I'm so glad I did. I didn't realize it was a big thing. I thought it was a little thing, but actually it was very, very, very big. I'm so grateful to God that I did that. A lot of things in our life like that. And that's the Jewish people. That's Joseph. We spoke about our energy as Rachel, total self-sacrifice, martyrdom. As Judah, Yehuda, totally appreciating and feeling God and such gratitude. And as Joseph, really taking those things that like are undervalued, are underappreciated, and really understanding and appreciate true worth. And I have so much more to say, but we will not, because we are over. So we're going to end at this point. Thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful week. Lots of things to think about. Lots and lots of things. It says you live with the times, you live with a portion of the week. So hopefully something from this will like be churning in your brain over the next days. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.